Who are you surrounding yourself with that you are expecting to get sound advice from? A majority of family farm operations in this country make emotional decisions, where those emotional decisions are the one thing that actually sinks a family farm operation. I will not take advice from anybody that is beneath me in the game of business.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of Legacy Farmer, the podcast. I'm your host, Jace Young, and today I'm joined by one of our business coaches, Katie Taylor. Katie, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be.
Perfect. Yeah, awesome. So I'm excited about this conversation, more excited to get to know more about your background and ultimately what things happened in your career that led you to Legacy Farmer. So if you're open to it, let's just start there. Talk about what you did prior to coming on to Legacy Farmer, and we'll just start the conversation there.
Yeah. So I did grow up on a row crop farm, so I've kind of always had an interest in ag from a young age. Went to the University of Minnesota for ag business and animal science production. Was very fortunate to get an internship at CHS, which kind of opened the whole world to commodity markets. I really had no understanding of it before then. So getting that role where I worked as an intern there really piqued my interest into that. And then I kind of finished off my college year focusing more on the finance, futures options side of ag business. Took a full-time role there as a commodity broker, and I got to work with producers and ag businesses, so a lot of elevators and the processing plants, just helping them with their marketing plans, trading futures and options, and giving advice as markets were very volatile. I did have the opportunity of, when I got out of college, there were a lot of events going on. So we had some trade wars, and then not too far after that, COVID. So a lot of heavy volatility in those markets. It was a great kind of learn by jumping in the fire experience.
Yeah, I bet so. So tell me a little bit, because first question I'm curious about is, you had one viewpoint on how the operation ran prior to obviously getting exposed to commodity markets and everything that you got exposed to after college and everything there. How did your really viewpoint on farming change, going from viewpoint of, hey, I'm just working on the family farm, to like, I can see the bigger picture here and how our farm contributes to the overall global economy and that type of stuff there? What were some things there that you learned or lessons that kind of stick out for you?
Yeah, so I think a big thing that I learned is how much of the markets are controlled by the funds, and just how much is not necessarily in the hands of like what the farmers are doing. So unfortunately, it's not a great game for us to have to play, but we do need to kind of figure it out, learn how the best way to navigate those challenges is. And that's been really exciting, to dive into markets and understand them, and then take all of that more complex and like financial understanding, and then how do we turn that into something that's digestible, something that actually works for our business, and not necessarily get too far in the weeds, but at least understand like what we can do to help mitigate some of those risks.
Yeah. So when you say most of the markets are managed or run by the funds, what do you mean by that?
Well, there's a lot of money that is in the commodities that don't necessarily have a physical position. So a lot of those large swings we see, especially, for example, like the cattle market yesterday, we had a huge swing just due to a headline that ended up being false. And that was because of the funds trading, and most of it is actually algorithm and computer trading. So whether or not that's actually a farmer that has a commodity position on, not usually as big of a portion of the market. So we do have to kind of deal with how these computer algorithms and how these funds are digesting headlines, and then have to deal with the brunt of those market swings.
Yeah. So what was your opinion though? And like, what things did you feel when you recognized that the markets aren't actually controlled by the actual producers on the ground, but by these hedge funds that just have billions of dollars to play with?
I think it's a little bit frustrating, because it can really screw people over. In some situations, we can see limit down moves for several days in a row, and then it ends up just being, well, we didn't ever need to do that in the first place. And I think it sucks that we have to suffer as farmers on the commodity price side, just because there's so much money involved. There is a good side to it as well, though, because with all of this money in the markets, we do have more liquidity, which allows for better pricing opportunities versus, let's say, you're dealing with like a cash market like DDGs or something. We don't get as much up and down movement in there. So there can be benefits as well as drawbacks, but it does kind of gets unfortunate when we have some of these more political and like global events that don't necessarily affect the S&D of crops.
Cattle prices, for example, moving $10 a head off of one news headline that has nothing to do with actual production reports, and where we're at there. So one of the things, and I'll kind of share a personal experience for me. When it came to this realization, the biggest and most frustrating point here was that we say we operate in free markets, when to me, this type of game that's going on and we're playing, do you really feel like we're operating in free markets, or is it more like manipulated markets with these hedge funds that have billions and billions of dollars to play with?
There can definitely be a little bit of manipulation, I think. And we see that in like what we call like the Goldman rule, for example. There's always these parts of the year where we have price swings just because a really large fund is moving their position. We at least understand that and kind of avoid trading around that, but it is unfortunate that they have that much sway just because of their position rather than actual fundamentals.
Yeah, for sure. So when we're talking about technicals versus fundamentals, right? There's obviously two type of traders there. I know majority of the hedge funds, they're obviously going to be more on the technical side of things, more farmers. It seems, my opinion is that it seems that people seem to lean towards more of the fundamental side of things and be actually paying attention to actually what's going on inside of the ag industry and things there. But where do you kind of lean there, and where do you see the right places to be?
I'm probably more of a fundamental trader personally. I really like to pay attention on S&Ds and what's going on within the demand and supply flows of each crop. However, I do think there is a place for technical trading. I think especially certain trends and understanding support levels, those can be really beneficial for marketing decisions.
Yeah. Do you feel like a majority of producers today understand those things? Because I agree with you. I think it's important to understand both sides of that coin and know enough, or at least have enough knowledge and education there to be dangerous in talking about these things and be able to roll with conversations. But do you feel like today's modern day ag producer understands both sides at the level they need to, or do you feel like there's some gaps there?
There's definitely some gaps. I don't think an average producer understands technical signals, but I don't necessarily know if they need to. I think that's when market experts come in, because you don't have time. You're on your farm, you're doing a lot of other stuff and have a lot of responsibilities there. You can't just sit at a computer and stare at charts all day. So that's when you take in, expert advice and at least understand why they're giving those signals, but being able to look for them is probably not as important.
Yeah. So when it comes to, again, talking about expert advice, like you just mentioned there, what are the red flags that farmers or producers need to be watching for from somebody that says that they're providing expert advice, which is actually like completely the wrong advice to be taking? What are some of those red flags that you should be watching out for?
I would say the biggest one is if it's a risky take that this person is giving them advice on. I think the best way in farming is to be risk adverse when it comes to your marketing. So anything that involves speculation, anything that's maybe a little bit too much production put onto one trade, those are big red flags. We want to play this safe. We want to protect our operation. So
yeah. Have you seen a lot of farmers in your career basically be too risky, right, and be placing too many bushels or too much just into one trade there on a regular basis? Have you seen people like that?
I've definitely seen farmers who get a little bit more speculative than what I would consider true hedging. So that would be the main issue, is they want to play in these markets. They see that the funds are making money and then they get interested in it. And I don't know if that, most times out of no, that's gonna burn you more than it does help.
I kind of go back to like an old principle of like, a fish in water that doesn't understand that it's swimming with sharks. Right, just thinks it's kind of in this safe little, small pool or whatever, not paying attention to the sharks lurking below the surface. They're ready to take advantage. Yeah. So jumping past, going from college into Cargill was right the next jump for you. Was that correct?
Yeah, so after CHS, I moved to Cargill, worked with their animal nutrition team for a couple of years, doing more of the internal risk management for middle proteins. It was a good introduction to cash markets rather than futures, and seeing the connections between some of the products that are produced by soybeans, corn, and other grains like wheats too. And then after that, I moved it to cargo risk management and just got back more into a customer-focused role, but that really brought me into the world of structured products, which I think now is a great tool for farmers. I really like to, I don't know if advertise is the right word, but I like to inform people about those because those can definitely work well for marketing plans.
Yeah. What were some of the biggest lessons you learned once you went over to the customer facing side there, whether it's working internally there at Cargill on that customer side of things and working with other, essentially reps or whatever, colleagues there inside the business, or working with producers as well?
There's such a wide range of knowledge between customer to customer. So the biggest thing I learned is just having to understand who you're working with and then hold that education and conversation to what they understand and what I like to call like their sophistication. I'm not going to use big terms with someone who doesn't understand how options work. I don't want to use the word dumb it down, but in a sense, make it simple so that they can actually digest it and they feel confident in their marketing plan. But then other customers might be really educated on options and futures, and then they want to have those more sophisticated conversations where I can use some of that language and apply it to their business.
Yeah. Do you feel like a lot of your colleagues understood that level of training like you did as well? Or do you feel like there was gaps there?
I think that there were probably some gaps. It kind of depended on if you're working with producers. I felt like the colleagues that were working more directly with farmers had a good understanding because most of them had the background. Whereas we had a split where a lot of people working with more of the consumer base, so that it got a little bit more technical. I do feel like I had more background in like the futures and options versus at Cargill they were more sales heavy. So it felt I probably had to pull myself back on technical knowledge versus some of them were more trained just in the structured products.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I bring that up and want to highlight that is because that's a unique skill set that we were looking at when, essentially we interviewed you to come on the team was, okay, there's people that have a lot of knowledge, but if you cannot teach people what's in here and dumb it down, I don't think you have to be polite at all. I think because I need people to do that to me, right? When there's new systems or new knowledge or something new that I'm stepping into, I need somebody to be able to explain to me like I'm a third grader. Otherwise, they don't really know it at the level they think they do. You know what I mean? And so that's a huge thing there that I think is a very unique skill that not a lot of people have. And obviously we have to have that inside of, with our business coaches and everything inside of Legacy Farmer too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely want people to be confident in the decisions they're making. And you really can only get that confidence if you understand what you're doing.
Yeah. Do you see any issue with these risk managers, right, that are essentially telling farmers exactly what to do, right? And what I mean is they're very opinionated. They're saying, hey, you need to sell X amount of bushels at this price. This is exactly what we're going to do. Or do you think it's better to be able to give farmers a range of different options here and let them really digest and understand and ultimately make the decision themselves?
I think it depends on the farmer themselves, to be honest. Some farmers want more of a hands-off approach because they don't feel like they can handle the load of managing their marketing plan while dealing with planting and being in the field. So I think there can be beneficial times where it's good to have someone giving you those direct communications. I prefer to be a little bit more specific to businesses though. The issue with some of those marketing brands is that they're just sending out the same recommendations to everyone.
Yeah.
How can we know that works for our bottom line and our break-evens personally? That would be the biggest issue there, I think.
Yeah, and the biggest issue too with the people that try to essentially just make, again, the same response out to all of their customers or things like that. Each customer is going to read that and based on their level of knowledge, they're going to interpret it differently, right, on what that means there. And I think that's where the game gets quite, pretty dangerous for a lot of these companies and ultimately a lot of customers as well. What are some of the biggest mistakes or common mistakes you see farmers making when it comes to marketing or hedging?
The biggest one is getting emotional. We see a lot of people get caught in markets. If we're talking about just spot price and understanding where we're locking in our price, we could see people, we lose 15 cents. Oh, I'll wait until it goes back up 15 cents. All of a sudden we're down 40 cents and it just continues to build up on that. Another one is listening to your neighbors. I hear so many stories of people saying, oh, well, my neighbor's never done any marketing and they always do better than me. Well, have you seen their metrics? Do you actually know that? Also, you need to be basing your marketing plan off of your specific business, not what your neighbor's doing. So
yeah, no, and I think we've seen that, even on our side where, working with all the customers I have over the years, everybody wants to compare themselves to their neighbor based on neighbors putting up a new shop or they're buying new combines, new trucks, new houses, whatever. And over the years, I've just learned that level of judging somebody or having that opinion on your neighbor, one, it just robs your focus from what you're building. But two, 99% of the time it's going to be wrong because if you got to look at the financial situation over there and really look at the numbers, you're going to figure out things aren't as great as what they may look from the outside looking in. Going back to emotions, right? And farmers being emotional with their marketing decisions and things like that. How do you get away from being emotional? What are the things or systems or strategies that people need to have in place to remove emotions from these critical financial decisions?
Having an outlined marketing plan is probably the main thing. And the first step to that is understanding your break-evens and being able to set those price goals based on what works for your business. And then I like to put percentages of production into time and price goals. So if we're not hitting the price goal, we still need to lock something in as long as it still works for our break-even. So that is the best thing, is having a plan in place, sticking to your plan, and not allowing your emotion to get you off path.
Yeah. Based on what you've seen in the industry, if you had to put a percentage on it, what percentage of farmers do you think actually have a marketing plan in place?
Oof, maybe 25%. That might be generous.
I think that'd probably be generous too. What percentage of farmers do you think actually know what their break even is?
15%.
So the numbers trending down, right? And the thing is though, is looking at those numbers like that, 25 and 15, how does that make you feel about the industry? Because for me, for example, man, the amount of numbers, I've talked to some people about this where I say, based on the information that I have, people read stories about the ag industry and about how things are going from the loan side of things and stuff like that. I'm like, you guys don't understand how big the problem really is. To the tune of billions and billions and billions of dollars that's literally just hanging in the balance, or being treated like, you're playing blackjack at the casino, essentially, right? Not having a game plan in place for all this money and everything that's going on, and going through your operation there. So how do you feel about that? How does that make you feel when you see how big the game is, but also too, how many people don't even have a game plan in place?
I think it's a little disheartening, but I mean, it's been nice to at least get to work with customers who are willing to take that step forward and work on their numbers. So I like that. It's the little wins that you have to count. But I feel like people are getting more active and trying to take control of their finances, which is really optimistic. And we just got to keep moving forward because it's a huge industry. There's a lot of money there, and there's no reason to be running these businesses like they're only a couple $100s.
What do you think is going to happen to the people that don't have a plan?
I can't imagine it would work out too well for them. And the longer you wait, the worse the situation gets, the harder it is to get out of it. So.
Yep. So do you think, let's say, we have some type of producer here. He's been dealing with this. He's listening to this podcast. He knows it's an issue for him and things like that. Are you of the opinion that they should just jump in straight away, hire somebody to essentially do all this work for them? Or do you think they should take a different approach there?
No, I mean, I think you need to do this work yourself. You need to understand your numbers and your business. You don't want to just pass that off to someone else because they're not the one who's sitting in your chair and working every single day in that business. And truly understanding your numbers and seeing them each day when you're entering them in cash flows or balance sheet is what you're going to be able to take away and make better, more educated decisions when you're buying something, when you're purchasing your fertilizer, when you're making your marketing plan.
Yeah. Well, and I go back to, known enough here to be dangerous, right? And I'm not saying people have to be experts when it comes to their grain marketing strategy or anything like that, but they need to know enough about the terminology and the lingo inside of the industry there to be able to run in these conversations with their broker or with their commodity person, whoever they're getting advice from there. Which, again, I feel, going back to your numbers, if 75% of the people don't even have a game plan in place, they don't even know enough here to even be running in these conversations there, which is even more risky for them going forward because they don't know what they don't know because they haven't even been exposed to it yet.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. All right, next question is what do you say to producers who think that their operation's too small to worry about markets or actually have a marketing plan in place?
I say that just because you're small doesn't mean the market's going to ignore you and not, in a sense, screw you over by price fluctuations. I think that there's so many options out there for us to use. There's structured products, there's HTAs, forwards, futures, options. If you're small, you don't need to open a brokerage account. You don't have to get into the issue of margins, but there are still opportunities to work with your co-op, to work with your local elevator, and at least get some protection on your prices because there's typically not bushel limitations on some of those products. So it's really just understanding what is possible for you and then making a game plan based on that.
Yeah. Why do you think people avoid this though?
I think it's just another responsibility that they then have to think about and deal with. And I think there's also a fear of the market. So part of it is I do not understand this, so I don't want to make that step forward. So education is part of it. And the other thing is there is always this perpetual bullishness in farmers where if prices aren't good enough, well, if I lock in now, what happens if we go up 15 cents? And that's a really bad mentality to get into. And then next thing you know, it's harvest and we're at $9 soybeans.
What's the old saying, I've never met a bearish farmer?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, essentially that's right? They let their emotions drive their decisions. Even if they're up, 15, 20 cents based on what their actual grain marketing plan was, do they have the discipline to sell? Right, which is obviously what we're trying to help them with in Legacy Farmer and sticking to the actual game plan on their cash flow projections and everything like that. Yeah. So with these guys though too that are avoiding this or not wanting to step into building out their own, grain marketing plan or learning about this type of stuff too, do you think it's because of they just don't have the time or the energy to do this, or do you think it's more ego driven where they don't want to be exposed for what they don't know?
It's probably a little bit of both. I've definitely met my fair share of farmers who are a little bit egotistical coming into it, and then they realize how much they don't know, and it's harmful for them to admit that, and you can kind of see it on their face when you're talking to them. It's an area that they don't understand, and that's embarrassing in a sense. I don't think that makes sense because you didn't go to college for finance. Like, why would you understand these things? I've spent 8 years of my life studying or working, and then 4 years studying these things. There's a reason why I understand them, and that's not expected. So that's definitely part of it. And then another thing might just be resources. not having the time to do the research yourself and then not having someone who's able to help you with that education can be a limiting thing as well.
Yeah. I always lean more towards, the easy answer for these people is to say, well, I just don't have the time to do this. Versus the real answer is more on the ego side and not accepting that, hey, I don't know much about this, and just owning up to that, right? And being okay with it. I think a lot of people inside the industry, especially on the banking side of things, in my experience there, people want to pretend like they know all this stuff inside the industry, whereas there's no way in hell that any one person can. If they do, it's because they've been at it for 50 years probably, and have taken 5 years of their time learning and studying commodity markets and learning enough there to be dangerous. And then you go over to banking, and then you go over to cash flow, then you go over all these things here, and really just develop all these different disciplines inside of the ag industry. The thing is like with farming, our ag producers are expected to know so much, and it is the one position in the world where if you're not an expert or know enough to be dangerous in all these different areas that could heavily impact your business, you could fail essentially, right? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it puts them in a really tough position. And that's why I feel like it is really valuable to have external resources like myself, like Legacy Farmer, that can help step in and provide that education. So you're not getting in the weeds and over-educating, but just having enough to allow you to run your operations smoothly.
Yeah. So you've obviously stepped in here into Legacy Farmer as a business coach. What are some of the things here that excite you about this position versus what you were doing at Cargill?
I think just working directly with producers and getting to educate people on kind of my own terms has been really nice. When you work in a corporate, like a large corporate, you're a little bit limited on what you can do, and you're kind of just stuck in the rat race. And here I feel like I can make a difference, I can make an impact, and I can help lead that and shape what that will look like both for the future of Legacy Farmer and also the future of our client.
Yeah. What do you mean by limited on what you can do though?
Well, it's corporates. I feel like when you started a project, there's 5 layers of people that need to approve it, and then there's 5 layers of people that need to send you their stuff, and it's just constant waiting for emails, waiting for approval, and that can take 6 months or a year, and then all of a sudden, is it worth what it was a year ago?
Yeah. Did you feel like your hands were tied on being able to help, your farmers and your producers at the level that you wanted to, or that you felt called to?
Yeah, I think so. I think that at CHS, I felt a little bit better about working directly with customers and having that constant communication, whereas Cargill, I was working more on like a corporate side, so it definitely limited myself there, and things were more structured in like once monthly meetings rather than just being able to pick up the phone and call someone.
Yeah. Well, and I talk about this though, because, again, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome, right? Even at CHS, you're working directly with customers, but still you, in the back of your mind, you want to do what's best for the customer, but you still have a responsibility to CHS to do what's best for them and marketing their products and stuff like that, right? And whereas coming over to Legacy Farmer, one of the benefits that we have is our only incentive is making sure the customer wins. There's no back end things here. There's no interest rate that we're earning on the back end or, commission we're getting from selling products or whatever. It's literally the incentive is making sure the customer gets the best experience. Does that connect with you, or was that any part of the reason as to why you wanted to exit that position to come over to Legacy Farmer as a business coach?
I think that's a huge reason. I probably wasn't the best salesperson at Cargill because I struggled with pushing products that I didn't believe fit with the market or fit with the person's specific business. So
yep. It's kind of tough there though too, right? So, and this is where a lot of people they've had experience in the industry like that, and this is also too where a lot of people where just the lack of trust comes in the industry as well, because there's always a new product, there's always a new variety of seed, there's always something new getting pitched every single year, versus us where we're just taking information from hundreds of other customers we've worked with, and we're just sharing what we know has worked and not worked in the past based off of facts, not theory or anything like that, right? And I think that's a huge thing. Obviously, one of the big reasons why I wanted to bring you onto the team there, because we need those type of people that are going to be focused on strictly helping the producers and trying to get them all the information they need to make the best possible decision for their operation and provide the training and education to do it. So next question here is kind of moving over to Legacy Farmer, and then we'll kind of wrap up here. But you've obviously onboarded and taken on some new customers and everything like that. Are there any specific breakthroughs or like aha moments that you can think of working with some of the customers here inside Legacy Farmer?
I think the biggest thing is once people really understand their break evens for each like field and each crop, that's when they're like, oh, I can actually make a marketing plan. Like I'm not stuck in this position anymore. So it's been nice moving forward, because when I met everyone that I've been working with, it was like, yeah, I've been wanting to do it, but I never did. And now we're actually seeing that traction, we're seeing that progress, and we've gotten things on paper, we've gotten things written out, and now we can let the crop year go and see how these things work out for us. So
Yeah. What are the feelings or emotions you like witness, the customer's experience when they have that aha moment?
it's a bit of relief, I think, especially this year with all the risk involved in some of these commodity markets. It's nice to see them feel more confident that it's going to work out for them in terms of their production and what we're getting price-wise for their commodities.
Yeah. You feel like there's just this release of stress and anxiety. It's like they're dropping all this weight off their shoulders.
Yeah, because you don't need to watch the markets every day. It's not part of your, that's not important for what you're doing daily. And if you get stuff locked in, you get things protected for the year, you can take that stress off and just focus on the actual boots on the ground farming. So
Yeah. Getting back to what they love to do, but we have so much information in today's day and age, and it's so easy to get access to that information to where these guys can literally become consumed with the markets literally every minute of every day. They can listen to some type of podcast or video or radio, whatever on that, and that's constantly dominating their train of thought up here and everything that's going on up here, which is breeding more stress, anxiety, and keeping them, not focused on the things they actually need to be doing to run a day-to-day operation. Wrapping up here, if you could give every farmer listening to this one piece of advice about marketing for the year ahead, what would it be?
Well, I think it's going to be a tough year for commodity prices, the way it's been shaping out. We're dealing with a lot of external demand pressures, exports, biofuel, recessionary concerns. So while tough markets are the hardest for us to remove that emotion from, I'm just going to stress again, we got to take it out. We got to have a plan. This year is probably going to be one of the most important to have those plans in place. So really understanding all of your options, getting a little bit creative with marketing. So using structured products like accumulators. I think this is going to be a key year for that because the way it's shaping out, it's very unlikely that we're going to have higher prices at harvest versus where we are now.
Yeah. Do you think, kind of follow on question to that, do you think a majority of producers are too stuck in the current year and not thinking long term and really committing to the long game of their operation?
Yeah, probably. I would say like 75% of my customers are focused too much on like what's going on right now, what's going on with planting. And that's the fun part of the job. And I get that we want to focus on those areas, but it takes away from the idea that we do need to be planning ahead, especially with marketing. We can't let these things sit for so long that all of a sudden we're down 50 cents versus where we were a few months ago.
Yeah. And I just think about the customers that I've worked with over the years and how many of them say, well, man, Jace, if things don't work out this year, like I could be done, right? If we don't get the rain that we need or whatever, right? Any number of the variables, if that doesn't happen, we could be done. And I'll say, well, John, did you have the same story 20 years ago? It's like, yeah, I was thinking the same thing back then too. Okay, great. And you're still here. Right. And so that's why I go back to like the importance of just having a long-term view and that we're in the long game here. This is 1 year out of the next 20 years of our life. Don't get so caught up. Realize and understand, hey, it's going to be a tough year. Markets aren't going to be where we want to go. But guess what? On your balance sheet, we're focused on the long game there. And if we lose a little bit of equity this year, okay, so be it. But are we planning for that? Or are we trying to hit one-hit wonders, just like you said, guys putting a lot more risk on the table than what they need to, and ultimately sacrificing years of equity in 1 year because we didn't control the emotions? Like that's where I get back to on this entire thing here. All right, so final question. What's something you wish more producers understood about markets that could save them a lot of stress?
I think just the idea that you don't need to be an expert on the markets. You can find someone you can rely on and give you that information, make it a lot easier for you to digest. And that kind of removes some of that stuck emotion of, I don't want to keep moving forward and I don't want to make a marketing plan because I don't understand it. Well, you don't necessarily need to understand everything. You just need to have someone who can provide you that education, give you that support, and then relay some of that market information.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight, provide the education and give you the training and support you need to understand why the marketing plan is the way it is. And I think, again, that just goes to a huge thing that we want to emphasize here at Legacy Farmers, that we want to train and educate our people so that they know why the numbers look the way they do or why their strategy is the way it is, so they can really take ownership over that decision versus just trusting somebody blindly. We're obviously not here to do that. So, okay. All right, Katie. Well, I enjoyed today's conversation and appreciate you joining me to have it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.